The wind howled through the auction yard, kicking up dust that stung the eyes of the gathered crowd. Ranchers, trainers, and curious onlookers shifted uneasily as Benedict Cross, a billionaire known for his ruthless business deals and even crueler dog training methods, stood at the center of the arena. His polished boots gleamed under the harsh floodlights, and his cold smile didn't reach his eyes. Beside him, locked in a rusted kennel, was K9, a massive German shepherd with a coat matted in dirt and scars. The dog's muscles were tense, his lips curled back in a snarl that sent a clear warning. Come closer, and I'll make you regret it. Benedict tapped the microphone, his voice dripping with arrogance. $1 million, he announced. That's what I'll pay anyone who can get this dog to sit calmly beside them for 5 minutes. A murmur spread through the crowd. Trainers who had worked with military dogs, ranchers who had broken wild mustangs, all of them hesitated. K9 wasn't just aggressive. He was broken. His eyes held something deeper than anger, betrayal, fear, a soul that had been crushed too many times. Then, from the back of the crowd, a small figure stepped forward. 12-year-old Lily Hayes, her hands tucked into the pockets of her oversized jacket, walked toward the kennel without a word. Her grandmother, Martha, called after her, but Lily didn't stop. She had been watching K9 since the moment she arrived, seeing something in him that no one else did. Benedict smirked. A kid? Really? You think you can do what grown men can't? Lily didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a small, worn harmonica, the only thing left from her father, a soldier who never came home. She lifted it to her lips and played. The notes were soft, shaky at first, but they carried through the air like a whisper. K9's ears twitched. His growling stopped. For the first time in years, the dog listened. The crowd fell silent as K9's tense body relaxed. His tail, which had been stiff with aggression, lowered slightly. Then, step by cautious step, he moved toward Lily until he sat, not because he was commanded, but because he chose to. Benedict's smirk vanished. His $1 million challenge had just been beaten by a little girl who hadn't even spoken a word. And in that moment something shifted, not just for K9, but for everyone watching. The silence in the auction yard was so thick it felt like the air itself had frozen. No one moved, not the hardened ranchers, not the professional trainers, not even Benedict Cross, whose face had gone pale under the harsh lights. Lily kept playing the harmonica, her small fingers moving gently over the worn metal, the melody soft but steady, like a heartbeat. K9 sat beside her, his breathing slow for the first time in years. His dark eyes, once wild with fury, were now fixed on her with something close to recognition, like he had finally found someone who understood the storm inside him. Benedict's jaw tightened. He had expected a spectacle. Some brute force trainer wrestling his dog into submission, proving that strength always won. But this? A child calming K9 with nothing but music? It made no sense to him. His reputation was built on dominance, on breaking animals until they obeyed without question. And now, in front of everyone, his own dog had chosen to listen to a girl who hadn't even raised her voice. The auctioneer, a grizzled man who had seen his fair share of drama, finally broke the silence. "Well, folks, looks like we've got ourselves a winner." His voice was rough, but there was a hint of something else in it. Respect, maybe even awe. Benedict's assistant, a wiry man with a nervous twitch in his eye, leaned in. "Sir, we can't just pay her," Benedict snapped, cutting him off. His voice was low, dangerous. He wasn't used to losing, and he certainly wasn't used to being humiliated. But he was a man of his word, at least in public. The crowd was watching, cameras were rolling, and he had no choice. Lily didn't react to the announcement. She didn't smile, didn't cheer. She just lowered the harmonica and reached out slowly, letting K9 sniff her fingers. The dog didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He simply pressed his nose against her palm, as if sealing an unspoken promise between them. Martha, Lily's grandmother, finally pushed through the crowd, her face a mix of shock and pride. "Lily, honey, what in the world?" "He's coming home with us," Lily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a fact. Benedict's eyes narrowed. The deal was 5 minutes of calm, not ownership, he said coldly. Lily turned to look at him, her gaze steady in a way that made even the billionaire hesitate. "You don't want him," she said simply. "You just wanted to prove no one could control him. But he doesn't need to be controlled. He needs to be heard," the crowd murmured. Benedict's face darkened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a child. But before he could respond, K9 did something no one expected. He stepped closer to Lily, his body blocking hers slightly as if shielding her. A low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. Not the mindless rage from before, but something deliberate. A message. Benedict took a step back. He had seen K9 tear through trainers twice his size. He knew what that growl meant. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. "Seems to me the dog's made his choice, Mr. Cross. Ain't no law against a girl taking home a dog she's clearly bonded with." Benedict's fists clenched, but he forced a smile. "Fine, take the mutt, but this isn't over." He turned on his heel and stormed off, his assistant scrambling after him. As the crowd began to disperse, Lily knelt beside K9, her hand resting lightly on his neck. "You're safe now," she whispered. And for the first time in his life, K9 believed it. The drive back to Martha's ranch was quiet, the only sounds being the hum of the old pickup truck's engine and K9's steady breathing from the back seat, where he lay curled beside Lily. Martha kept glancing in the rearview mirror, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, still trying to process what had just happened. She'd known Lily had a way with animals ever since she was little, how stray cats would rub against her legs without hesitation, how even the most stubborn horses in their stable would calm when she sang to them. But this, taming Benedict Cross's unbreakable dog in minutes, that was something else entirely. The weight of the check in her pocket, $1 million, felt unreal. It was more money than she'd seen in her entire life as a ranch hand, enough to fix the leaking roof, pay off the land taxes, maybe even expand the stables. But as she glanced back at Lily stroking K9's fur with that faraway look in her eyes, Martha knew the money wasn't the real miracle here. K9 lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking forward as the truck turned down the long dirt road leading to the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the fields in gold and orange, and for a moment everything felt peaceful, until the dog let out a sharp whine, his body tensing. Lily immediately stopped petting him, her hands hovering. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're okay." But K9 wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the rear window, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. Martha frowned, checking the mirrors. At first, she saw nothing but empty road behind them. Then, just as they crested the hill, a black SUV appeared in the distance, moving fast. Too fast for a country road. Her stomach dropped. Inside the SUV, Benedict Cross drummed his fingers against the leather seat, his cold eyes locked on the pickup ahead. His assistant, Davis, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Benedict snapped. He hadn't driven out here to negotiate. That dog was worth more than the $1 million he'd just lost. Trained K9s with that level of aggression and intelligence were rare, and he'd invested years into shaping him into the perfect demonstration for his controversial training methods. Letting some nobody kid walk away with his prize asset? Unacceptable. His phone buzzed. Another message from the investors asking about the viral video of Lily and K9 at the auction. The footage was everywhere now, and the comments were brutal. If a child can calm that monster with kindness, what does that say about Cross's methods? His jaw clenched. He needed to fix this. Now, back at the ranch, Martha parked hurriedly, her heart pounding. "Lily, take K9 inside now." The girl didn't argue, sliding out of the truck with K9 close behind, his body rigid, his growl low and constant. Martha watched them disappear into the house before turning to face the SUV screeching to a halt in her driveway. Benedict stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on gravel, his smile all teeth. "Martha, was it? We need to talk." Inside, Lily pressed her back against the front door, her breath coming fast. K9 paced in front of her, his claws clicking on the hardwood, his ears flat against his skull. Through the window, she could see Martha crossing her arms, her posture defiant. But Lily knew her grandmother couldn't hold off Benedict forever. Her gaze darted to the old harmonica still clutched in her hand, then to the dusty photo on the wall of her father in his uniform, his own K9 partner at his side. A memory flickered, her dad whispering, "Dogs like these don't need commands, Lily. They need someone to listen when they're screaming inside." Outside, Benedict's voice grew louder. "That dog is my property. The money was for the stunt at the auction, not for you to keep him?" Martha scoffed. "Funny. Didn't see a leash or paperwork when you paraded him around like some prize fighter." Benedict's patience snapped. "Enough. Davis." But before his assistant could move, a sound cut through the tension, a sharp, metallic click. The front door swung open, and there stood Lily, K9 at her side. Only now, the dog wasn't growling. He was silent, still. And in Lily's hands wasn't the harmonica, but an old weathered journal, her father's military K9 training manual, its pages filled with handwritten notes. She met Benedict's gaze head-on, her voice clear. "You trained him wrong." Benedict froze. "What?" Lily opened the journal to a dog-eared page, her finger tracing an underlined passage. "K9s like him don't respond to fear. They respond to trust. My dad wrote that, and you broke him." Her voice wavered, but her hands didn't. "That's why he attacked your trainers. That's why he listened to me." For the first time, Benedict looked unsettled. How did this kid know? Then his eyes landed on the journal's insignia. His blood ran cold. Hayes. Sergeant Daniel Hayes had been one of the best K9 handlers in the military, until he and his dog died in combat 2 years ago. A tragic loss, the news had called it. Benedict had called it convenient. Hayes had been vocal about opposing his harsh training methods, even testifying against him in court. And now, here was his daughter, standing in front of him with his dog, holding his notes. The universe had a sick sense of humor. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Benedict's face. "Well, isn't this poetic?" He took a step forward, and K9 lunged, not at him, not at Davis, but past them, toward the trees at the edge of the property, his bark sharp and urgent. Lily's head snapped up. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Then the night exploded with noise, the distant roar of engines, the flash of headlights through the trees. Not one car, not two, several. And they weren't here to talk. Martha paled. "Lily, get inside." But it was too late. The first motorcycle skidded into view, its rider masked, a glint of metal in his hand. Benedict whirled around, his cool facade cracking. "What the hell is this?" The rider didn't answer. He just raised his arm, and shot out the ranch's front porch light, plunging them into darkness. K9's snarl was the last thing Lily heard before chaos erupted. The darkness swallowed everything at once. The ranch, the trees, even the sound of the motorcycles as their engines cut off abruptly. Lily froze, her fingers tightening around K9's collar as the dog's growl vibrated against her leg. Martha grabbed her shoulder, yanking her backward toward the house, but Benedict was already shouting, his voice sharp with something Lily had never heard from him before. Fear. Davis, get the car. A gunshot cracked through the night, and the SUV's windshield shattered. Davis screamed, diving to the ground as Benedict scrambled behind the vehicle, his tailored suit scraping against dirt. Lily didn't have time to process what was happening before K9 wrenched free from her grip and charged into the blackness, his barks echoing like thunder. Martha shoved Lily toward the porch. Go! Now! But Lily couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the spot, her eyes straining to see through the shadows where K9 had disappeared. Then, a yelp, a man's curse, the sound of a struggle. Her heart stopped. Without thinking, she sprinted forward, Martha's shouts fading behind her as she plunged into the trees. Branches whipped at her arms, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she didn't slow down. Somewhere ahead, K9 was fighting, and she couldn't leave him. The clearing came into view like a scene from a nightmare. 3 masked figures surrounded K9, one clutching a bleeding arm, another waving a knife. The third had a gun trained on the dog, his finger tightening on the trigger. Damn mutt, he spat. Lily didn't think. She threw herself between them, her arms spread wide. The gunman hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. K9 lunged again, his teeth sinking into the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the ground as the man howled, and in the chaos, Lily grabbed it, her hand shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She'd never held a gun before. She didn't even know how to fire it. But the masked men didn't know that. Back off, she whispered. It should have sounded weak. It should have been laughable. A 12-year-old girl with a voice like a ghost, pointing a weapon she couldn't use. But something in her tone made the men freeze. Maybe it was the way K9 stood beside her, his muzzle dripping red. Maybe it was the way her eyes burned in the moonlight. Too old for her face. Or maybe it was the distant wail of sirens growing louder by the second. The men exchanged glances. Then, like shadows, they melted into the trees, leaving behind nothing but tire marks and the metallic tang of blood in the air. Lily's knees gave out. The gun slipped from her fingers as K9 nudged her cheek, whining softly. She buried her face in his fur, her whole body trembling. What just happened? Who were those men? Why were they here? Footsteps pounded behind her. Martha, her face streaked with dirt, her hands clutching a shotgun. Lily, oh God! She dropped to the ground, pulling Lily into a crushing hug. Over her shoulder, Lily saw Benedict staggering into the clearing, his suit torn, his expression unreadable as he stared at the gun on the ground. Sheriff Dawson arrived minutes later, his deputies fanning out with flashlights. Martha, you all right? Lily? His gaze landed on Benedict, and his mouth thinned. Cross, fancy seeing you here. Benedict didn't answer. He was too busy staring at Lily, his eyes flickering between her, K9, and the abandoned weapon. Something clicked in his mind then, something that made his blood run cold. Those men hadn't been after the ranch. They hadn't been after Martha. They'd been after him. And if Lily hadn't intervened, if K9 hadn't attacked, he'd be dead right now. The sheriff hauled Benedict aside, his voice low. You want to explain why a bunch of armed men just ambushed this property? And don't feed me some corporate rivalry bullshit. I know you've got enemies. Benedict's jaw worked silently. He did have enemies. Powerful ones. The kind who didn't take kindly to being exposed for illegal dogfighting rings. The kind he'd testified against to save his own skin. But he never thought they'd come for him here. Lily watched them argue, her mind racing. None of this made sense. Why would anyone attack Benedict at their ranch? Unless, her breath caught, unless they'd followed him, unless he'd led them right to her and Martha. Anger bubbled up inside her, hot and sharp. K9 pressed against her side, sensing her distress, and she tangled her fingers in his fur. They weren't safe. Not anymore. The sheriff's radio crackled to life. "Dawson, we got a problem. The perimeter's clear, but we found something in the trees." A pause. "You're going to want to see this." What they discovered changed everything. A black duffel bag, half buried under leaves. Inside, blueprints, photos, and a file labeled Project Cerberus with Benedict's company logo stamped across the top. The sheriff's face darkened as he flipped through the pages. "This your handiwork, Cross?" Benedict's silence was answer enough. Lily didn't understand most of what she saw. Lists of chemicals, training schedules, notes on behavioral modification. But one photo made her stomach twist. A younger K9, muzzled and strapped to a table, his eyes wide with terror. Her father's. Handwriting circled the image. "This isn't training. This is torture." The pieces crashed together. Her dad had known. He'd known what Benedict was doing, and he'd tried to stop it. And now, Benedict was here, on their land, with killers on his trail. K9 let out a sudden growl, his gaze locked on the trees. Lily followed his line of sight and saw it. A flicker of movement. A glint of metal. They weren't alone. The sheriff reached for his gun. Everyone inside, now. But it was too late. The first explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending dirt and debris flying. Lily hit the dirt, K9's body shielding hers as the world erupted into fire and noise. Somewhere in the smoke, Benedict was shouting. Martha was screaming her name, and the sheriff was barking orders into his radio. But all Lily could hear was the roar of engines revving to life and the chilling sound of footsteps closing in. They were coming back, and this time they wouldn't miss. Smoke choked the air, thick and acrid, as Lily rolled onto her side, coughing violently. K9 stood over her, his body trembling but steady, his ears flat against his skull, as another explosion rocked the far side of the property. The barn. Flames licked up the old wooden beams, casting eerie shadows across the yard. Martha was shouting something, her voice raw with panic, but the ringing in Lily's ears drowned out the words. She could barely see through the haze, but she didn't need to. The message was clear. This wasn't just an attack. This was an erasure. Someone wanted Benedict Cross gone, and they were willing to burn everything, and everyone around him, to ash. Sheriff Dawson dragged Benedict behind the remains of an overturned water trough, his face streaked with soot. "You got a death wish, Cross? Who the hell did you piss off enough to send a hit squad after you?" Benedict's hands shook as he clutched the duffel bag of incriminating files. His usual arrogance shattered. It's not just me they want dead, it's the evidence. Project Cerberus was never supposed to see daylight. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me this is about some damn dog training program?" Benedict barked a hollow laugh. "Training. This was about building weapons. Canines that could take down targets without hesitation, without remorse. Hayes, Lily's father, he found out. He was going to expose it all." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. Her dad hadn't just died in combat. He'd been silenced, and now The same people who killed him were here, finishing the job. A surge of fury burned through her, hotter than the fire spreading across the ranch. K9 nudged her arm, his nose cold against her skin, and she forced herself to focus. They needed to move. Now, Martha grabbed Lily's wrist, pulling her toward the house. "We gotta get to the cellar. It's the only place that might hold if they—" A bullet whizzed past, splintering the porch railing beside them. Martha yanked Lily down as more shots rang out, the masked figures advancing through the smoke. K9 snarled, his body coiled to attack, but Lily gripped his collar. "No, they'll kill you." The dog resisted, his muscles taut, his eyes locked on the armed men. He wasn't just protecting her. He was remembering the muzzles, the straps, the pain. This was his fight too. Benedict suddenly lunged forward, snatching the sheriff's radio. "You want Cerberus? Come and get it!" He roared into the static, his voice carrying across the property. Then, to everyone's shock, he took off running, straight toward the burning barn. The gunmen hesitated, then split up, two chasing Benedict while the others closed in on Lily and Martha. "That idiot's gonna get himself killed," the sheriff muttered, cocking his revolver. "Lily, listen to me. When I say go, you and your grandma run for the truck. Don't look back." Lily shook her head violently. "We can't leave K9. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "That dog's got a better chance out here than we do. Now go." A shout cut through the chaos. Benedict's voice, ragged with pain. He'd made it to the barn doors, but one of the gunmen had him pinned, a knife glinting in the firelight. Lily's breath caught. Despite everything, she couldn't just let him die. K9 made the choice for her. With a deafening bark, he tore free from Lily's grip and bolted toward the barn, a black streak against the flames. The remaining gunmen turned, raising their weapons, but K9 wasn't their target. The sheriff fired first, dropping one with a shot to the leg. The other swung his gun toward Lily. A harmonica's note pierced the night. Lily hadn't even realized she'd pulled it from her pocket, but the sound was enough to make the gunman falter. Just for a second. Just long enough. K9 hit him like a freight train. The barn doors burst open as Benedict stumbled out, clutching his side, K9 at his heels. Behind them, the fire reached something volatile. Fuel, chemicals. Lily didn't know, and the world turned white with the force of the blast. The shockwave knocked her off her feet, the heat searing her skin as debris rained down. When she opened her eyes, the barn was gone. So were the gunmen. Silence. Then, a whimper. K9 lay a few feet away, his fur singed, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. Lily scrambled to him, her hands hovering, afraid to touch. "No, no, no!" Benedict limped over, his face ashen. He saved me." The words sounded foreign in his mouth. The sheriff radioed for an ambulance, but Lily knew. They were miles from help, and K9 wasn't getting up. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her forehead to the dog's, her harmonica still clutched in her fist. She didn't play, she didn't speak. She just stayed there, breathing with him, as his panting slowed. A hand touched her shoulder. Benedict. He didn't apologize, he didn't make excuses. He just knelt beside her in the dirt, his expensive suit ruined, his pride in tatters, and whispered, "I can fix this." Lily looked up, hope and suspicion warring in her chest. "How?" Benedict's gaze flicked to the duffel bag, then to the distant lights of approaching sirens. "I know where they keep the others." The others. More dogs like K9, more victims of Project Cerberus. And suddenly, Lily understood. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ambulance lights cut through the smoke like strobes, painting the scorched earth in flashes of red as paramedics rushed toward them. Lily refused to move from K9's side, her small hands buried in his singed fur, even as the medics tried to pull her away to treat the burns on her arms. "He needs help first," she demanded, her voice cracking with the desperation that made the seasoned EMT pause. Benedict stood nearby, his usually immaculate appearance reduced to tattered clothes and soot-streaked skin, watching silently as the vet technician examined K9's injuries. The diagnosis came like a hammer blow: a broken leg, severe burns, and internal bleeding from the blast. The technician shook his head grimly. "We can stabilize him, but he needs surgery. The nearest animal trauma center is 3 hours away." Lily's heart plummeted, but then Benedict did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone and barked orders into it. "Prep my private jet at the regional airport, now." He turned to the stunned medics. "That dog will be at Cornell's veterinary hospital within 90 minutes or heads will roll." As the medical team worked to stabilize K9 for transport, Sheriff Dawson pulled Benedict aside, his voice a low growl. "You think playing hero now makes up for what you've done? Those files show your company was weaponizing dogs, Cross. That's illegal as hell." Benedict's face was unreadable in the flashing lights. "I know exactly what it shows, Sheriff. And I know the men who just tried to kill us will keep coming unless we stop them." He glanced at Lily, who was whispering to K9 as the medics worked. "That girl just risked her life to save mine. The least I can do is save her dog." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Why? What's really in this for you?" Benedict's jaw tightened. "Redemption doesn't come cheap, Dawson. I'm buying mine." The ride to the airport was a blur of panic and painkillers for both K9 and Lily. Martha clung to her granddaughter in the back of Benedict's armored SUV as it sped through back roads, constantly checking the rearview mirror for pursuers. Lily barely registered the bumps in the road, her entire focus on K9's labored breathing in the specialized crate beside her. Every gasp from the dog sent a fresh wave of terror through her. She barely noticed when Benedict took a sudden sharp turn off the main road, his phone pressed to his ear. "Change of plans. We're taking the secondary airstrip. And Davis, arm the security team." Lily's head snapped up at that, but before she could ask questions, Martha squeezed her hand warningly. The older woman's eyes were hard with suspicion as she watched Benedict. This sudden helpfulness didn't erase years of cruelty, not by a long shot. The private jet was a sleek predator of metal waiting on the darkened runway, its engines already whining to life. As they loaded K9's crate aboard, Lily caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. The same black SUVs from the ranch were speeding toward the airport gates in the distance. Benedict saw them too, and immediately barked orders to his pilot. "We leave now!" The jet's door hadn't even fully closed when the engines roared, and they began hurtling down the runway. Through the window, Lily watched as the SUVs smashed through the gate, armed figures pouring out just as their plane lifted into the air. One of the men raised something long and metallic. A rocket launcher? But they were already climbing too fast. The shot, if there was one, lost in the night sky. In the plane's dimmed cabin, Benedict finally seemed to deflate, sinking into a leather seat with a pained groan. Now that the adrenaline was fading, Lily could see the dark stain spreading. Strange part, his rage markers are dormant. In 20 years of studying these dogs, I've never seen that. "Whatever you've been doing with him," Lily didn't let her finish. "Music," she whispered. "I play the harmonica for him." The room went utterly still. Even Benedict seemed frozen. Dr. Voss slowly removed her glasses. "You're telling me auditory stimuli suppressed his genetic modifications." Before Lily could respond, alarms suddenly blared through the hospital, the lights flashing red. A voice over the PA system barked, Lockdown initiated. All staff to emergency stations. Benedict was on his feet in an instant, yanking open the door to reveal chaos. Nurses running, security teams arming themselves. He grabbed the nearest orderly. What the hell is happening? The man's face was sheet white. Intruders. They came through the east wing. They're releasing the animals. Lily didn't wait for explanations. She ducked under Benedict's arm and sprinted down the hall toward the surgical wing, her heart hammering against her ribs. The doors were sealed shut with some kind of electronic lock, but through the small window she could see the operating room in disarray. Overturned equipment, flashing warning lights, and no sign of K9 or the medical team. A hand grabbed her shoulder. Benedict, his face grim. They're here for him, Lily. The same people who attacked the ranch. Then the screaming started. From deeper in the hospital came sounds no child should ever hear. Snarling, growling, and worst of all, human shrieks of terror. Benedict pulled Lily behind him as a pack of dogs rounded the corner, their eyes wild, foam dripping from their jaws. But these weren't ordinary dogs. Their muscles bulged unnaturally under patchy fur, some with exposed cybernetic implants glinting along their spines. Cerberus subjects, and they were coming straight for them. Lily acted on instinct. She yanked the harmonica from her pocket and played. Not the soft lullaby this time, but a sharp, staccato series of notes that echoed like gunshots through the hallway. The effect was instantaneous. The lead dog, a massive Rottweiler with exposed teeth, skidded to a halt, its head cocking to the side. The others behind it froze too, their growls dying in their throats as the sound washed over them. Lily kept playing, pouring every ounce of fear and hope into the music, stepping forward as the pack actually retreated, their ears flattening not in aggression but recognition. Benedict stared like he was witnessing a miracle. How are you? Then the answer struck him. The DNA modifications, they didn't just enhance aggression, they keyed the dogs to respond to specific auditory triggers. Lily didn't stop playing, but her mind raced. If the bad guys could control the dogs with sounds, and she could calm them with music, that meant... A new voice cut through the chaos. Well, isn't this fascinating? A man in a black tactical suit stood at the far end of the hall, flanked by armed guards. His face was obscured by a high-tech visor, but the way Benedict stiffened told Lily everything. This was the enemy. The man tapped his visor, which whirred as it zoomed in on Lily's harmonica. Subject 9 was always defective. Too much Hayes DNA in its sequencing. But you're something special, aren't you? He took a step forward. Give me the instrument, child. It belongs to the project. Lily's blood ran cold. Subject 9, Hayes DNA? The pieces crashed together with horrible clarity. K9 wasn't just some random dog they'd experimented on. He was special. He was connected to her father, and these people had known it all along. Benedict moved suddenly, shoving Lily behind him and pulling something from his coat, the vial of blue liquid from the plane. Back off, Crane. You don't want to do this. The man, Crane, laughed. Still playing the hero, Cross? After all the dirty work you did for us? He raised a device that made Benedict go pale. A small black remote with a single red button. Let's see how your little miracle worker does against Phase 2. He pressed the button. Somewhere deep in the hospital, something roared. Not a dog. Something much, much worse. The walls shook with the force of the creature's roar, sending ceiling tiles crashing down in chunks as emergency lights flickered wildly. Lily's harmonica slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor as a sound like cracking concrete echoed through the hallway. Crane's smile beneath his visor was all teeth. You thought Cerberus was just about dogs. How quaint. Benedict shoved Lily toward an open maintenance door, his voice raw with urgency. Run! Don't stop for anything! But Lily couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the spot as the far wall exploded inward in a cloud of dust and debris. What emerged from the smoke wasn't a dog, wasn't even an animal. It was a nightmare given flesh, a grotesque fusion of canine and machine, standing nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, its exposed cybernetic spine pulsing with red lights, its jaws lined with razor-sharp titanium teeth. The creature's eyes locked onto Lily with terrifying intelligence, and she knew with chilling certainty, this thing remembered her. Dr. Voss appeared suddenly, dragging Lily backward as the beast advanced. That's Subject Zero, the first successful hybrid, she hissed. They used your father's K9 unit as the base template. Its neural pathways are still partly his original dog's. The revelation hit Lily like a physical blow. This abomination contained pieces of her father's loyal companion. The dog she'd grown up with before it was shipped back to duty. The dog that had died with her dad. Rage, unlike anything she'd ever known, burned through her veins. These people hadn't just experimented on animals. They'd desecrated memories, turned love into a weapon. Benedict threw the vial of blue liquid at Crane's feet, where it shattered, releasing glowing vapor. Last chance to walk away. Crane just laughed, stepping back as Subject Zero lunged, not toward Lily, but toward the remaining Cerberus dogs who cowered against the walls. The monster's jaws closed around the Rottweiler's neck with a sickening crunch, silencing its whimpers instantly. It wasn't attacking. It was eliminating competition. Crane's voice dripped with amusement. Zero was programmed for one purpose: target acquisition and elimination. And right now, its prime target is... A gunshot rang out. Subject Zero howled as its left hind leg sparked, the bullet finding some vulnerable circuitry. Sheriff Dawson stood in the shattered remains of the entrance, his smoking revolver raised, an entire SWAT team pouring in behind him. Everyone down now! The creature turned on him with terrifying speed, but Lily was already moving. She snatched her harmonica from the floor and blew a single, piercing note. Not a melody, but a sound like a dog's bark. The same one her father used to call his K9 partner. Subject Zero froze. Its massive head swung toward Lily, the red lights along its spine flickering erratically. For one impossible second, recognition flashed in those unnatural eyes. Then Crane smashed his fist against the remote again, and the light stabilized into an angry crimson. "Enough of this," he snarled. "Kill the girl." The hybrid charged. Lily closed her eyes and played. Not the bark this time, but the first song her father ever taught her on this very harmonica, his K9's favorite. The melody filled the hallway, shaky at first, then stronger, as the memory of her dad's hands guiding hers gave her strength. She expected pain, expected death. What came instead was an impact that knocked the breath from her lungs as something heavy collided with her. Not teeth or claws, but the massive weight of Subject Zero's head pressing against her chest, knocking her onto her back. The creature loomed over her, drool dripping onto her shirt, its breath hot and metallic. But it wasn't attacking. Its entire body trembled violently, like two forces were warring inside it. The red lights along its spine flickered between crimson and a soft, pulsing blue. Crane's shout of rage was cut short as Benedict tackled him, the two men crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The remote skittered across the tiles, landing at Dr. Voss's feet. She brought her heel down on it with a satisfying crunch. Without its signal, Subject Zero's convulsions intensified, its whines pitiful and confused. Lily, still playing with tears streaming down her face, reached up and touched the scar above its left eye, a scar she recognized. "Buddy," she whispered, the name of her father's dog. The effect was instantaneous. The red lights along the creature's spine winked out entirely, replaced by steady blue. Its cybernetic components disengaged with audible clicks, leaving just an ordinary, if massive, German shepherd staring down at her with clear, familiar eyes. The beast that had been Subject Zero was gone. In its place was the dog her father had loved. Chaos erupted around them as SWAT secured Crane and his men, but Lily barely noticed. All that mattered was the weight of Buddy's head resting gently on her chest, his tail giving a single, weak wag as she kept playing. Benedict appeared beside them, his face bloody but triumphant. The counteragent in that vial, it was keyed to Zero's original DNA markers. It was always meant to undo what they did to him. His voice dropped, just like your music undid what they did to K9. A weak bark came from down the hallway. K9, alive, bandaged, dragging his IV stand behind him, limped toward them, his tail wagging furiously at the sight of Lily. Buddy lifted his head and let out a sound that was half whine, half joyful howl at the sight of his old littermate. The two dogs touched noses gently, some unspoken understanding passing between them. In that moment, Lily understood the real truth. Project Cerberus hadn't created monsters. It had trapped heroes, and she'd just set them free. But as the adrenaline faded, a new sound cut through the celebration, a familiar engine roar from outside. Lily's head snapped up as Sheriff Dawson cursed. They brought reinforcements. Through the shattered windows, black helicopters descended like vultures, their spotlights sweeping the building. Crane, now in handcuffs, grinned through bloody teeth. "You really think the project ends with me? Cerberus has facilities on 6 continents. You've won nothing." Benedict helped Lily to her feet, his grip tight on her shoulder. "He's right. This fight's bigger than one facility. But now we have something they don't." He nodded to where Buddy and K9 stood side by side, their eyes clear and alert. Living proof that what they built can be undone. Lily picked up her harmonica, the metal warm from her grip. She knew what came next. Knew it would be dangerous. Knew she might not survive it. But as Buddy nuzzled her hand and K9 leaned against her legs, she also knew something else. Some bonds couldn't be broken. Not by science, not by greed, not even by death. And that made them unstoppable. The hospital's parking lot had turned into a war zone. The black helicopters hovering like monstrous insects as armed figures in tactical gear rappelled down onto the blood-slicked pavement. Sheriff Dawson's SWAT team formed a protective circle around Lily and the dogs, their rifles trained on the descending operatives, but the numbers weren't in their favor. Benedict grabbed Lily's arm, his fingers trembling, not from fear, she realized, but from the adrenaline crash of his untreated knife wound. "There's an underground service tunnel beneath the morgue," he gasped. "Leads to the old steam plant next door. We can—" A bullet shattered the window above them, showering glass onto K9's bandaged back. The dog didn't flinch. His body pressed firmly against Lily's legs, his eyes locked on the approaching threat. Buddy, now freed from his cybernetic prison but still enormous, let out a growl that vibrated through Lily's bones, a sound that promised violence if anyone came closer. Dr. Voss suddenly appeared, shoving a medical bag into Benedict's hands. "There's a sedative strong enough to drop an elephant in there. Use it if you have to." Her eyes flicked to Buddy, then to Lily. "That hybrid's neural pathways are stabilizing, but his genetic modifications could reactivate under stress. If he turns again—" She didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. Lily tightened her grip on the harmonica, the metal biting into her palm. She wouldn't let Buddy become a monster again. Couldn't. The first explosion rocked the east wing, sending a fireball boiling into the night sky. In the chaos, Benedict dragged Lily toward a service elevator, the two dogs following close behind. Martha was already inside, her face streaked with soot, her hands clutching a stolen handgun. "Took you long enough," she muttered, jamming the basement button. As the doors slid shut, Lily caught a glimpse of Sheriff Dawson standing his ground against the advancing mercenaries, his revolver flashing in the darkness. Then the elevator descended, plunging them into eerie silence. The only sound was K9's panting and the drip of Benedict's blood on the floor. The basement level was a maze of flickering lights and dripping pipes, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and something more metallic, the morgue. Benedict led them past rows of stainless steel drawers, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Almost there," he wheezed. Then the power went out. Pitch darkness swallowed them whole. Lily felt K9's nose press into her hand just as Martha's grip found her shoulder. "Don't move," her grandmother whispered. Somewhere in the blackness ahead, Buddy let out a low whine, not of fear, but of warning. Then Lily heard it too, the soft click of boots on tile. Someone was down here with them. A flashlight beam sliced through the dark, illuminating a figure in a lab coat standing by the tunnel entrance. Lily's heart leapt into her throat, until the light shifted to reveal Dr. Voss's face, pale and drawn. "They've taken the upper floors," she whispered urgently. "There's another team coming down." Buddy's sudden snarl cut her off as he lunged past Lily, his massive body colliding with something unseen in the shadows. The flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning wildly, its beam illuminating glimpses of the nightmare unfolding. Buddy pinning a black-clad operative to the ground, K9 circling to protect Lily, Benedict fumbling with the medical bag. Then a gunshot, a yelp of pain. Lily screamed as K9 collapsed, a dark stain spreading across his bandages. The flashlight rolled to a stop, its beam now shining directly on the shooter, a woman with cold eyes and a pistol aimed straight at Lily's chest. "Enough games," the woman said. "The director wants the girl alive. The rest are disposable." Time seemed to slow. Lily saw Martha raising her stolen gun, too slow, saw Benedict lurch forward, too weak, saw Buddy turning, too late. Then the morgue drawer beside the woman suddenly burst open with a metallic shriek, and a black-furred missile launched itself at her throat. It was the Rottweiler, the same one Subject Zero had killed upstairs. Its neck wound was horrific, its movements jerky, but its teeth found the woman's arm with unerring accuracy. The gun went off again, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly into the ceiling as the woman screamed. More morgue drawers began rattling open up and down the corridor. The other Cerberus dogs, the ones Crane's team had supposedly put down, emerged one by one, their eyes glowing faintly blue in the darkness. They moved with purpose, surrounding Lily and her group, forming a living barrier against the approaching operatives. Dr. Voss's voice was hushed with awe. The counteragent, it didn't just affect Subject Zero, it's spreading through the entire pack like a virus. Benedict stared at the Rottweiler, which was now standing guard over K9's body. "Not a virus," he corrected softly. "A cure." The tunnel entrance beckoned, a sliver of moonlight visible at the far end. But as Lily turned to help K9, the wounded dog let out a weak bark and nudged something toward her with his nose, the woman's dropped pistol. Lily recoiled. I can't." Martha picked it up instead, her hands steady. "You won't have to," she promised. Then to Benedict, "Get her out of here, whatever it takes. Lily opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of more boots pounding down the stairwell cut her off. The choice was made for her. Benedict grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the tunnel, Buddy at their heels. Lily's last glimpse of the morgue was Martha standing shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Voss and a pack of once feral dogs, the stolen gun raised defiantly as the first shadows of enemy operatives rounded the corner. Then the darkness swallowed them whole. The tunnel was damp and endless, the only light Benedict's flickering phone. Lily ran until her lungs burned, her hand clutching the harmonica like a lifeline, Buddy's panting breaths warm against her back. K9 wasn't with them. Martha wasn't with them. The weight of that knowledge threatened to crush her, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. After what felt like hours, fresh air hit her face as they emerged into the abandoned steam plant. Moonlight poured through broken skylights, illuminating the rusted machinery in silver relief. Benedict collapsed against a pipe, his face gray with pain and blood loss. "We can't stop here," he gasped. "They'll have trackers, thermal scans. We need to—" A noise from above made them both freeze. Perched on the catwalk overhead, silhouetted against the moon, stood a figure in a long coat. As he stepped into the light, Lily recognized him instantly. The man from Benedict's files, the one labeled Director. His smile was pleasant, his voice warm, and that made it all the more terrifying. "Lily Hayes," he said, spreading his hands as if welcoming an old friend. "I've been so looking forward to meeting you." Behind him, a dozen pairs of glowing red eyes blinked into existence. Not dogs this time. Not even hybrids. Something worse. The director's polished shoes clicked against the metal catwalk as he descended the rusted stairs, his shadow stretching long and grotesque across the steam plant's filthy floor. Moonlight glinted off something metallic in his hand, a small device that pulsed with soft red light, matching the rhythm of the glowing eyes in the darkness above them. Lily's breath caught in her throat as shapes began detaching from the shadows. Creatures that walked on two legs but moved with animalistic grace, their faces obscured by high-tech masks, their fingers ending in curved, claw-like prosthetics. Benedict shoved Lily behind him, his body trembling from blood loss, but his voice steady. "You're breaking every international law by deploying human hybrids, Director." The man's laughter echoed through the cavernous space, rich and warm like a beloved uncle's. "Laws?" He spread his arms wide. "We write the laws, Cross, and after tonight no one will even remember this little rebellion." His gaze shifted to Lily, and his smile turned almost pitying. "Your father said almost the same thing before he died. Such a waste." The words hit Lily like a physical blow, but before she could react, Buddy let out a thunderous growl and launched himself at the director. The massive hybrid moved faster than anything his size should, until one of the humanoid creatures intercepted him mid-air with a kick that sent 200 pounds of muscle and fur crashing into a pile of pipes. The impact shook the building, but Buddy was back on his feet instantly, circling warily as more of the creatures dropped from the catwalks surrounding them. Lily's hands shook as she raised the harmonica to her lips, but the director tutted. We've analyzed your little party trick." He pressed a button on his device, and a high-pitched whine filled the air, making Lily clap her hands over her ears in pain. The sound cut through her like a knife, vibrating in her bones, turning her vision white with agony. Through the haze, she saw Buddy collapse, writhing, the blue lights along his spine flickering back to angry red. The director's voice cut through the noise. "Every Cerberus subject has a fail-safe frequency, even your father's precious K9 unit." Benedict was on his knees now, blood streaming from his nose from the sonic attack, but his hand crept toward the medical bag Dr. Voss had given him. The director noticed and sighed. Really, Cross? After everything, you're still playing hero. He nodded to one of his creatures which lunged, only to be intercepted by a blur of black fur as K9 came barreling out of nowhere, his bandages flying, his teeth sinking into the hybrid's arm with a crunch of breaking machinery. Lily's heart leapt. He was alive. But the joy was short-lived. The wounded creature simply backhanded K9 across the room like a rag doll, sending him skidding across the concrete. The director shook his head. Loyal to the end. How very canine. The sonic assault cut off abruptly, leaving Lily's ears ringing. She gasped for air, her vision swimming, as the director crouched before her. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne and something faintly antiseptic. "Here's what's going to happen," he said gently, as if explaining to a small child. "You're going to come with me. Your friends will die quickly. And tomorrow, when they find your body in the wreckage of this plant alongside Cross's, the world will mourn the tragic accident that killed the girl who tamed the monster dog." Poetic, don't you think? He reached for her. A gunshot rang out. The director staggered back, clutching his shoulder, his perfect facade cracking for the first time as blood seeped through his fingers. From the shadows near the tunnel entrance, Martha stepped forward, her stolen pistol smoking, her face a mask of fury. Behind her came Doctor Voss, Sheriff Dawson, and, impossibly, the entire pack of Cerberus dogs, their eyes blazing blue. "You were saying?" Martha growled. Chaos erupted. The dogs surged forward in a wave of fur and teeth, slamming into the human hybrids with terrifying force. The director scrambled backward, shouting orders into his comms as his creatures engaged, but the tide had turned. Sheriff Dawson fired again, taking out one of the hybrid's mask lenses, sending it stumbling blindly. Dr. Voss rushed to Benedict's side, jabbing him with a syringe from her bag, and Lily crawled toward K9's motionless form, her heart in her throat. The old dog was breathing, but barely, his ribs rising and falling in shallow hitches. She pressed her forehead to his, the harmonica still clutched in her hand. "Please," she whispered. "Not you too." A shadow fell over them. The director loomed, his wounded shoulder forgotten, his free hand holding a sleek black pistol aimed at Lily's head. "Enough," he spat. Then, movement. K9's eyes flew open. With a strength that defied his injuries, the dog launched himself upward, his jaws closing around the director's gun hand with a sickening crunch. The man screamed as K9 whipped his head violently side to side, the sound of breaking bones audible over the battle. The gun skittered away as the director fell, clutching his mangled wrist, his face contorted in rage and pain. "You miserable animal," he shrieked. "I'll skin you alive." K9 stood over him, bloody but unbowed, his lips peeled back in a snarl that promised death. Lily reached for him, then froze as the director's good hand yanked something from his coat, another remote, this one with a large red button under a safety lid. Benedict's eyes widened in horror. "Lily, stop him, that's the—" The director flipped the lid, pressed the button, and somewhere deep underground, in a dozen secret facilities across the world, containment protocols were overridden. Sirens began wailing in the distance. The director laughed through the pain, his voice giddy with triumph. "You lose. All of you. In 24 hours, every Cerberus subject on the planet will be unleashed. Cities will burn, governments will fall, and when the dust settles," his bloody smile widened, "we'll be the ones holding the leash." Lily stared at the madman bleeding on the floor, at the battle raging around her, at the wounded but defiant K9 standing guard over her. She thought of her father, of Buddy, of all the dogs, all the lives this man and his organization had destroyed. Then she did the only thing she could. She raised the harmonica to her lips and played, not a lullaby this time, not a bark, but a song. The same one her father had whistled every morning as he prepped his K9 unit for duty. A melody of dawn and duty and unbreakable bonds. As the notes filled the ruined factory, something extraordinary happened. One by one, the fighting dogs disengaged from their battles, turning toward Lily. The human hybrids hesitated, their masked heads cocking in confusion. Even Buddy, still flickering between red and blue, paused to listen. The director's smirk faltered as his creatures stopped obeying his orders, drawn instead to the small girl with the harmonica. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible. The fail-safes—" Dr. Voss stepped forward, her voice ringing with revelation. "You built your control system around canine responses, but music, real music, doesn't just speak to trained instincts, it speaks to souls." The harmonica's song swelled, echoing off the metal walls, and Lily poured everything she had into it. Her grief, her hope, her unshakable belief that no creature was beyond saving. The Cerberus dogs began to whine and wag their tails. The human hybrids removed their masks, revealing faces twisted not with rage, but with dawning awareness. And Buddy threw back his head and howled. Not in pain, not in anger, but in answer. The director screamed as his perfect weapons turned toward him, their eyes clearing, their postures shifting. For the first time, real fear flashed across his face. "You don't understand. The protocols are already activated. Nothing can stop what's coming." Lily lowered the harmonica, her voice steady. "Yes, it can." She nodded to Benedict, who pulled a small transmitter from his pocket, the same one he'd used to send the counteragent through Cornell's ventilation system. "You're right," he told the director. "The fail-safes won't hold, but this will—" He pressed a button and a signal burst into the air. A signal carrying Lily's harmonica melody, amplified 1,000 times, set to repeat on every emergency broadcast frequency worldwide. The director's face went slack with horror. "You wouldn't dare," Benedict smiled. "Already done." Outside, the sirens grew louder. But they weren't warning of disaster. They were playing music. The director's scream of rage was drowned out by the wailing sirens outside, now broadcasting Lily's melody across the city. One by one, the human hybrids dropped to their knees, their mechanical enhancements powering down as the music overrode their programming. Buddy's glowing red spine flickered and stabilized into a steady blue, his eyes clearing as he turned to nuzzle Lily's hand. Crane's voice crackled over the director's comm device. "Sir, we have a problem. The counter-signal is spreading." Facilities in Berlin, Tokyo, and D.C. are reporting all subjects non-responsive. The director lunged for Lily, but K9 intercepted him with a snarl, pinning the man down as Sheriff Dawson slapped cuffs on his wrists. "Game over," the sheriff growled. As dawn broke, Lily stood amidst the wreckage, watching the freed hybrids help emergency crews. Benedict limped to her side, bandaged but alive. "You did it," he said quietly. Lily shook her head, looking at K9 and Buddy. "We did it together." The morning sun painted the ranch in golden light as Lily sat on the porch steps, K9 resting his head on her lap, while Buddy lounged at her feet. The scars from their battle remained. K9's limp, Buddy's cybernetic implants now dormant, but their eyes were peaceful. The news played softly from inside the house, reporting the shutdown of Project Cerberus and the arrest of its leaders. Martha handed Lily a steaming mug of cocoa. Proud of you, kid. Benedict, now helping authorities expose the project's secrets, had kept his promise. The ranch was now a sanctuary for freed Cerberus animals. As Lily played a soft tune on her harmonica, the dogs gathered around, their tails wagging in unison. Moral lesson: true strength isn't in control, but in understanding. The world's fiercest storms, whether in hearts or in creatures, can be calmed by kindness, patience, and the courage to listen.